Greetings everyone, welcome to Advanced, and this game is from Esports World Cup, and it's an Armageddon game between Alireza Firouzja and Hikaru Nakamura. With the white pieces, we have Hikaru Nakamura, and you know what happens when you get the white pieces in Armageddon. You have to win. A draw is a lost. So let's see how Hikaru deals with that. So without further ado, let's start with this game. We have e4, e5, bishop to c4, knight to f6, and going for d3. We go for the Berlin defense, and we have knight to c6, and we have knight to c3. Knight to a5, bishop to b3, and just knight captures. A captures, bishop to b3, bishop to b4, and here just f4. And f4 is definitely a new move. You could also play, just develop the knight, develop the bishop, maybe castle in the future. But here in this position, f4, and almost immediately after Alireza just went for e captures, Hikaru started shaking his head, and he did not think this through. It was all intuitive play, and I think it just backfired because here just knight to f3 was played by Hikaru, but just d5. And now you could potentially get away with this d5 by going for the castling. And here after like captures, you know you're going to lose a pawn, but you might be able to get something in this position. But you can just castle in this position, and here most likely what's going to follow is this capture, knight captures, and here going for this knight to d5. And here just after you try and do anything in this position, you have to get the knight back. So here just knight goes back, but now you get knight to e3, and here after rook to e1 just castles. And now here bishop captures, f captures, rook captures. You get this position where you might have some chances black is better, but there might be something in it for you. But here after e5 just d4 by by Alireza without even thinking twice. But this e5 is a terrible move. I mean, I don't know what Hikaru was thinking, but just after d4 here just bishop to d2. But now here just knight to g4, and now you understand what is happening here in this position. There is absolutely nothing you can do. Even if you castle, I mean, you lose the piece, and there is, what are you going to do thereafter? Here knight to e4, but now here knight to e3. Queen is under attack, so you're going to have to move it. So queen to c1, but now knight captures on g2, and you lose your castling privileges. And here king to f2, but just bishop captures, queen captures, and knight on e3 is an absolute monster. And here rook a to g1. Now these rooks look absolutely amazing in this position, but there are no threats for black in this. And here after bishop to g4, the only move in this position that gives white something, is queen to b4. And he played it in just 10 seconds. That's how good Hikaru is. Bishop captures, king captures, and queen to d5 might look like it's all a lot scary, but you have to play it precisely, because here after rook captures, Arisa is just up one pawn, and how he's going to capitalize on his being up a pawn. Let's see how that happens. But Alireza goes for castling queenside, and this just gives Hikaru some hope, because he played immediately almost queen to c5, and this is the only move in this position that gives you something as white. Queen to e6, not going for the trade, but Alireza missed one move in this position, which is this queen captures on a7, and now black king is very much vulnerable. I mean, it's not winning, but again, it's very much dangerous, because now the king goes here, and you're on the same line as the rook. It could get troublesome. And here you could play queen to h3, and here once the king moves, now play knight to d5, making room for the queen. And once the queen gets there, it's almost over for you. So here is queen to a8 check, king to d7, queen to a4 check, king to c8. Most likely gonna have to settle for perpetual, but a perpetual is a loss for Hikaru. And but he does not find this move. Here after queen caps on a7, he does not find queen to h3. He plays b6, and b6, how is gonna deal with him? Let's see. Here h3 by Hikaru, and here is king to d7, but now here knight to g5. This knight to g5 completely blunders the game. I mean, there are a lot of moves you could have played. You could have gone for this queen to a4 check and followed from there, but Hikaru wanted a win, and for that you have to make some sacrifices, but he sacrificed the game. Here queen to d5 check, and now you see the problem. This is hitting directly the rook. You can go back, but then your position is completely crumbles apart. So here king captures on f4, giving up a full piece to Alireza to start the attack. But here rook to 8, and Reza didn't take it because he knows that the end game would be very much winning for him. So he went for the safest option. But now comes rook captures with the check. So you sacrifice the queen, knight captures, rook captures, and here knight captures. And once you look at this, what is the aftermath of all of these things? You do have a knight and rook, and same as black, and you're up a pawn. So can Hikaru win this? Well, no, because your knight is trapped. And now where do you go? If you go here, then just rook comes in, and you know that you're under the shadow. If you even try this, then this king captures, you're gonna lose the piece and the game. But Hikaru still trying, he has to win this. So he played c3. The best would have been king to e4, and here after rook captures, now you play this c3, rook to g8, king captures, knight to f5 check, king moves, and here just rook to g2. and here rook to b1, but just c6. And here after d4, you can see that you have some compensation for the sacrifice piece, but not too much. But maybe, just maybe, here Alireza was around 2.5 minutes on the clock, while Hikaru was well over 6 minutes. So you could flag him. There are no increments in this. So here after rook to a8, not going for that, but he went for c3 right away, and it just doesn't work because here rook captures, now c captures, and now here just knight to d5 check, king to e4, c6, just rook to f1, and Hikaru is definitely going to try and flag Armageddon, but everyone knows it's just impossible. And here you can see that the king is very much in a trouble spot. If somehow you can get a rook to give one of these checks, I mean, it's going to be very much difficult. And here king to e6, rook to c1, and here just king to d7, rook to f1, king to e6, rook to f5, rook to g8, but now here just rook to h5, and here rook to f8, rook to h6 check, king moves, and here just e6 check, and now king moves, but now we have e7. So definitely Hikaru trying and getting something out of the position, but here just king captures, rook caps on c6, knight to f6 check, king to e5, knight to d7 check, king to e4, knight to f6 check, king to e5, knight to d7. And Alireza would love to just get a perpetual, because if he does, then you know what's going to happen. He gets a draw, he gets the win, he moves to the further rounds of the winners bracket. So Hikaru has to move king to d5, but here rook to f5 check, king moves, and here just rook captures. Now this pawn is, you cannot defend that pawn, and you cannot even attack this pawn. Knight is defending it, so there is nothing in the position. You have to push those pawns. King to c3, rook caps on h3, d5, and here rook to h5, but now just going for this rook to e6 check, king to d8, and here just going for this king to c4. And here after king to c7 we have d4, but now here rook to h1, just trying and harassing the king from the backside. And here we have rook to c6 check, king to b7, rook to e6, and here king to c7, rook to d6 check, king to b7, and here just d5. And these pawns look really scary, but there is nothing in this position, because even if you try this rook to c1 check, which was played in the game, king to b4, rook to c5, but now you get this, don't worry about the bar, even if it's a draw, it's going to be a loss, so there is no point. Rook to c8, rook to e8 check, king to b7, and here rook to d8. And here we have knight to b8, but now here just rook to h8, and here rook captures on d5, rook caps on h7, king to c6, and here the absolute funny thing is that you can see that the bar almost shot down completely here on move 57, because here after Hikaru played this, he didn't even realize it, neither did Alireza. He was down to roughly 20 seconds on the clock, that it's a mate in two. Knight captures on knight to a6 check, only places this, and this is actually checkmate. So they both missed it, and they just captured the pawns, and the game went on. But you have to keep on checking the black king, and find some ways to actually, maybe, just maybe, Alireza in time pressure, just if you can flag him, but it's going to be very much difficult. King to c4, rook caps on d6, and here just king to rook to h8, attacking the knight. Knight moves, rook to c8 check, king to b7, and here rook to h8. We have king to c6, rook to h5, and here it's just knight to c5. And you can see that slowly but surely those pieces are going to be developed, and it's going to be very much difficult. And here b4, b5 check, but now just king moves, knight to e4 check, king to b3, rook to d3 check, king to c2, rook to d2 check, king to b3, rook to d3, and if you get a perpetual, it's a loss. So here again, king to c2, rook to d2 check, king to b1, and here rook to d4. You cannot defend that pawn. That pawn is going to be captured. Rook to h6 check, knight to d6 blocking, b3, but now rook caps on b4, and we have king to c2, rook to e4, but now here king to d3. And here again, rook to e5, rook to h3, rook to d5 check, king to c3, rook to c5 check, and here king to b4, and here knight to d, here rook to d5, rook to c3 check, king b6, and we have this rook to h3. Just trying something, because that's all you can do in this position, because it's very much difficult for black to make progress as well. But black only needs to draw, you need a win. So it's going to be very much difficult here. Rook to d4 check, king to c3, rook to d5, and all of these moves were played by instantly by Reza. He was down to 20 seconds on the clock, so maybe Hikaru can flag him, but it gets very difficult. Rook to h8, king to c5, and here rook to b8, b4 check, king to c2, and here knight to b5, rook to c8 check, king to b6, and we have rook to h8, king to c5, rook to c8 check, king to b6, and we have rook to h8, king to c5, here rook to h4 check, rook to h4, knight to d4 check, and here rook to b2, but here knight to b5, rook to c4 check, and here just rook to king to b6, knight captures on b4. And this issue, knight captures on b4, you cannot capture that pawn. The best in this position is just to get away with those checks, and maybe, just maybe, you're able to find some sort of a way where you can make flag Alireza. But this just doesn't work, because now just this, and after rook to d4 you have to trade that piece. So here, rook to c4, but now rook captures, b captures, knight to d6, king to c3. But now after rook captures on c4, it was a draw, and Alireza goes on to the next round of the winner bracket. And in just 94 moves, Alireza Firouzja was able to beat Hikaru Nakamura, and he proceeds to the next rounds of the Esports World Cup. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll be coming back with games like these. So stay tuned to the channel, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be coming back with such amazing games. So stay tuned.